They tried to steal my $280,000 home with $4,800 in fake violations while I was watching my mother die until I stood up at their packed emergency meeting, flashed my federal judge badge, and watched their entire criminal conspiracy collapse like a house of cards. Picture this. 47 furious neighbors crammed into our stale community center, local news cameras rolling, and this corrupt HOA president screaming at me to shut up and pay your fines. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like electricity in the air as I slowly reach into my purse. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Federal Judge Patricia Hawthorne. The room goes dead silent. And what I've witnessed here tonight constitutes multiple federal crimes. Her face drains of every drop of color. The deputy, her own cousin, takes 3 steps away from her. Game over. What would you do if vultures tried to steal your house during your darkest hour? Drop your location below. Let's see where my fellow HOA warriors are watching from. My name is Patricia Hawthorne, and for 18 years, I've been a federal judge. But 3 years ago, I was just exhausted. Bone deep tired of being your honor every single day, listening to criminals make excuses and lawyers argue semantics. So, when I bought my modest ranch home in Meadowbrook Estates, I kept my mouth shut about my day job. This quiet suburban HOA community seemed perfect. 180 homes built in the 1990s, properties running $280,000 to $320,000. Monthly fees, just $85 for landscaping and pool maintenance. Most neighbors were retirees or young families. Nobody asked probing questions about careers, and I loved being plain old Patricia, who complained about Netflix prices and waved from her driveway. That peaceful anonymity lasted exactly 2 years and 11 months. Last spring, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I took 6-month family leave, hired Henderson's Lawn Service, HOA approved, arranged mail forwarding, and spent every day 200 miles away watching the strongest woman I knew slowly fade in a hospice room that reek of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. The day after Mom's funeral, while I was still in my black dress, still tasting tears, I came home to find my front door buried under certified mail. The house hit me with that musty, abandoned smell, and wilted sympathy flowers were turning brown on my kitchen counter. Then I saw the thick envelope marked Final Notice, Meadowbrook, HO, $2,400 in violations. My hand started shaking as I read the itemized list of pure fiction. 12 grass violations at $50 each. Grass allegedly 0.5 in over-regulation height. The same grass cut weekly by their approved contractor. 6 mailbox violations at $75 each for non-regulation color. My forest green mailbox that matched 47 others in the neighborhood. And the masterpiece, $900 for unauthorized landscaping modification. I'd removed a dead rose bush with written email approval. Screenshots saved on my phone. Here's the beautiful part. Every violation was dated during Mom's final weeks when I was photographed at her bedside surrounded by hospice staff who could verify my presence. The letter was signed by Brenda Kirkpater, HOA president, giving me 10 days to pay or face foreclosure proceedings. 10 days. I spent 3 days chasing this woman through voicemail hell. When I finally cornered her, her voice could have frozen boiling water. Violations are violations, Mrs. Hawthorne. Grief isn't an excuse for property neglect. Property neglect. While my mother was dying, perhaps you'd be happier in a senior community with less responsibility. That fake sweet tone made my skin crawl. The same condescending voice I'd heard from hundreds of defendants who thought they were smarter than the system. But here's where 18 years of judicial experience kicked in. I started investigating. Evening walks revealed 3 for sale signs on homes with recent violation letters. Public records showed all 3 sold to KCS Holdings for $40,000 below market value. KCS Holdings traced directly back to Kirkpatrick Construction. Same last name as our HOA president. Shocking coincidence, right? But the smoking gun was in the details. Every violation letter had identical formatting, including the same weird spacing error after periods. Same computer, same author, same systematic targeting of specific properties. I was looking at either the world's most obsessive HOA president or a criminal conspiracy designed to steal homes from grieving families. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Brenda's white Lexus SUV parked outside Florence Murphy's house, 3 doors down. Florence, 82 years old, recently widowed, clutching a violation letter through her front window with tears streaming down her face. They weren't just coming for me. This was a pattern, a business model, and I was about to show them exactly what happens when you target a federal judge's community. Brenda struck fast. 48 hours after our phone call, I found an emergency HOA meeting notice crammed in my mailbox. Tuesday, 2 p.m. sharp. Their bylaws required 7 days' notice, but rules were apparently just suggestions for board members. The meeting topic made my blood boil, addressing ongoing violations that threatened community property values. I was being made into a public example. Tuesday afternoon, I expected maybe a dozen people. Instead, 12 terrified residents sat scattered across 50 squeaky folding chairs in our overheated community center. The broken air conditioning made the room smell like burnt coffee mixed with fierce sweat, and fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Brenda commanded the front card table like Napoleon reviewing troops. Navy blazer, perfect blonde bob, signature clipboard clutched like a scepter. Her 19-year-old nephew Chad sat beside her, nodding at everything she said with the enthusiasm of someone getting paid to agree. "We're addressing a serious threat to community standards," Brenda announced, clicking through PowerPoint slides that belonged in a middle school presentation. My property photos appeared on screen, grass identical to every neighbor's lawn. My regulation green mailbox, the approved rose bush removal site. Our certified inspector, she gestured proudly at Chad. Documented violations exceeding standards by measurable margins. I stood, ring binder in hand. "May I respond to these accusations? This isn't a courtroom, Mrs. Hawthorne. It's a board meeting. Then why am I being tried in absentia?" The binder hit her card table with a satisfying thunk. "Here's written approval for that rose bush removal. Here are receipts from your approved lawn service. Here's photographic evidence. My grass height matches surrounding properties exactly." Brenda barely glanced at my documentation. These could easily be fabricated. The accusation of fraud hit like a physical blow. In 18 years on the federal bench, nobody had ever questioned my integrity so casually. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm saying desperate people fabricate evidence." She turned to address the room with theatrical authority. "The board has already filed preliminary lien paperwork to protect community interests." My stomach dropped. "Without notification, that violates the bylaws, give this board discretionary authority." Her voice took on that sing-song tone of someone who thinks they hold all the cards. "All in favor of enforcement action." For hands shot up immediately. The board. 12 residents weren't even allowed to vote on something that could destroy my life. But here's where my judicial training kicked in. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "For the record," I said loudly, "you're proceeding with liens based on violations that occurred while I was 200 m away caring for my dying mother, documented by hospice records. You're ignoring written approvals and contractor receipts, and you're filing liens without proper notification procedures." Brenda's confident smile flickered. "You can't record this meeting." "Actually, I can. This is a public meeting addressing my property, and single-party consent recording is legal in this state." I held up my phone so everyone could see the red recording dot. Legal takeaway: always record HOA meetings where your property is discussed. It's your right and their nightmare. The room's energy shifted. Several residents sat up straighter. Florence Murphy stopped crying and started listening. "Motion carries," Brenda announced quickly, but her voice had lost its authority. 2 hours to settle violations. As people filed out, I heard different whispers than before. "She's got a point about the timing. Recording was smart. Maybe we should start documenting things, too." But the real mini twist came as I packed my binder. Tom Bradley, the veteran who'd nodded earlier, approached me quietly. "Ma'am, I've been tracking these violations for months. Same pattern on 15 families, same outcome, 4 sales to the same buyer." He slipped me a folded paper. "Thought you should know you're not the first." I unfolded the paper in my car. A handwritten list of addresses, violation dates, and sale prices, all below market value. All sold to KCS Holdings within 6 months of violation letters. Brenda wasn't running an HOA. She was running a real estate acquisition scam using violation harassment to force distressed sales. The lien filing wasn't her victory. It was her confession. She just handed me the pattern that would destroy her entire operation. But first, I needed to document everything properly. Time to build a case that would make her wish she'd never heard the name Patricia Hawthorne. The hunter had just become the hunted. Brenda didn't appreciate being recorded. The next morning, her white Lexus SUV crunched up my driveway at exactly 6 a.m. like a suburban vulture marking territory. She emerged in military inspection mode, razor-pressed khakis, polo shirt that cost more than most people's monthly groceries. Chad trailed behind with camera and measuring tape, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," that aggressive cheerfulness people use when they're about to ruin your day. Time for our routine property wellness check. Through my bedroom window, I watched them measure everything with psychotic precision. Grass height with a plastic ruler. Distance between my car and curb. Even my garden gnome's height, for Christ's sake. The performance was so absurd it would have been comedy gold if it wasn't designed to terrorize me into submission. This became my daily 6 a.m. torture alarm. Brenda's wellness checks with increasingly creative violations. She photographed non-existent paint chips, counted Christmas decorations in September, 0, but apparently suspicious, documented my car's parking angle like she was investigating a federal crime. But the real assault started when my services mysteriously vanished. Wednesday. "Sorry, Mrs. Hawthorne. We're terminating your lawn contract immediately. Henderson's has serviced this neighborhood for 3 years. Why? Look, we heard you're litigious and behind on fees. Can't afford that liability." Thursday. Pool access card dead. System glitch affecting only your account. Friday. Mailbox key useless. HOA requested security upgrades. Forgot to notify you. By Saturday, I realized Brenda was systematically cutting me off from every community service, isolating me like some suburban exile. Time for nuclear-level counterintelligence. Monday lunch break, I hit the county courthouse. The records department reeked of old paper and crushed dreams, but those musty files contained pure dynamite. 4 hours of digging revealed the pattern. 23 homes forced into below-market sales after violation harassment campaigns. Every property purchased by shell companies tracing to Kirkpater Construction. The average loss per homeowner, $47,000. Financial takeaway. Research recent sales in your HOA. Patterns of below-market transactions often expose organized theft schemes targeting vulnerable families, but the nuclear bomb was in HOA budget documents. Last year, $180,000 in violation fee revenue from 180 homes. Community improvements actually completed, maybe $23,000. The missing $157,000 went to consulting fees paid to KCS Consulting Kirkpatrick Construction Services under a paper-thin disguise. Then I found the smoking gun that changed everything. The original 1994 HOA covenant buried in Archive County records looked nothing like Brenda's current bylaws. The real governing document required homeowner votes for any rule changes. I found 0 records of such votes ever occurring. Every violation letter, every fine, every lien filing, all based on unauthorized rules that had no legal standing. But the mini twist that made my prosecutor heart sing came from an overheard phone conversation as I left the courthouse. Brenda's voice, crystal clear, drifting from the parking garage stairwell. "We need to accelerate the timeline on Hawthorne. She's getting too nosy, asking too many questions. File the foreclosure paperwork tomorrow. I don't care if it's early. My buyer's financing expires next month, and this corner lot is worth double what we'll pay. What if she lawyers up?" Another voicemail. Nervous. "Then we make her life hell until she gives up. Worked on 15 other families. 1__, widow isn't going to break our system." I recorded every word on my phone, hands shaking with fury and adrenaline. That evening, I connected with Margaret Morgan, the accountant fighting her own $3,200 violation. Siege for excessive children's toys in yard. Her attorney, Daniel Rodriguez, had been tracking similar cases across 3 counties. "It's bigger than just our neighborhood," Margaret whispered by the mailboxes, bouncing her fussy toddler. Rodriguez says they've stolen over $2 million in home equity using HOA violations. "But Patricia, be careful. Brenda has connections at city planning. This could get dangerous." Dangerous. After listening to them plot my financial destruction while I was still wearing my funeral clothes, dangerous sounded like exactly what I needed. That night, I spread Tom Bradley's handwritten victim list across my kitchen table alongside courthouse documents and recorded conversations. 6 years of systematic home theft, targeting families during illness, divorce, job loss, death, the most vulnerable moments of human existence. But what made me smile in the darkness was a simple realization. Brenda thought she was crushing some helpless widow who'd roll over and surrender. Instead, she'd just declared war on a federal judge with 18 years of experience dismantling criminal enterprises far more sophisticated than her pathetic suburban racket. Game on, Brenda. Game_. Brenda wasn't done playing games. 3 days after I recorded her criminal conspiracy confession, a certified letter arrived from Meadowbrook Legal Services, which sounded official until you realized it was her brother-in-law's strip mall law office. The demand was breathtaking in its audacity. $4,800 in accumulated fees, plus $2,200 in administrative costs and attorney fees. $7,000 total, with exactly 5 days to pay or face foreclosure proceedings. But here's where Brenda got sloppy. The letter claimed I'd waive my right to appeal by failing to attend mandatory mediation sessions. Problem was, no mediation had ever been scheduled. They were fabricating procedural compliance to fast-track my destruction. The attached evidence was a masterclass in creative fiction. A sworn affidavit from their property inspector claiming I was hostile and threatening during official visits. Photos allegedly showing property damage, brown spots in my lawn from dog urine. I don't own a dog. Never have. My personal favorite was the stack of certified mail receipts proving I'd refused delivery of previous violation notices. The receipts were dated during Mom's final week in hospice when I was photographed holding her hand as she took her last breath. These people weren't just criminals. They were sociopaths. Time for the counterpunch that would end this war. I called Margaret Morgan, who connected me with her attorney, Daniel Rodriguez. His office was everything I'd expected from someone fighting HOA corruption walls covered with case files, whiteboards mapping property theft schemes like FBI crime scenes, coffee-stained legal pads everywhere. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Rodriguez said, leaning back in his squeaky chair. "You're not going to believe this, but you're the 7th Meadowbrook resident I'm representing this year. Same pattern, same tactics, same outcome, forced sales to the same buyer." He pulled out a thick manila folder marked Kirkpatrick Enterprise. "Here's what we've documented. 15 below-market acquisitions in the past 3 years. Average profit margin $62,000 per home. They've been running this scam across 4 counties targeting families during crisis moments, death, divorce, job loss, medical emergencies." Rodriguez spread photos across his conference table like a crime scene investigation. Property addresses, violation letters, sale prices, acquisition dates. The pattern was undeniable and absolutely infuriating. "The beautiful part," he continued, "is they've gotten lazy. Same violation language across multiple properties, same formatting errors, same witness signatures. Chad's been inspecting properties he's never physically visited." But the real bombshell came when Rodriguez explained Brenda's timeline pressure. City planning records show pre-applications for variance permits on your corner lot. Combined with the adjacent empty lot she already owns, Brenda's positioning for high-density development. Your forced sale completes her assemblage for a duplex project worth over $300,000 in profit. Legal takeaway. Check city planning records for development applications near your property. They often reveal the real motivation behind HOA harassment campaigns. That's when Rodriguez dropped the nuclear option I'd been building toward. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I have to ask, what's your professional background? Your documentation skills and legal instincts are unusual for a typical homeowner." For 3 months, I'd kept my judicial identity locked away, wanting to fight this battle as a regular citizen. But staring at photos of 15 destroyed families, listening to Rodriguez describe a criminal enterprise that had stolen over $2 million in home equity, I realized the time for playing normal had ended. "Daniel, what I'm about to tell you stays between us until I decide otherwise. Of course, I'm a federal judge. United States District Court, Northern District, 18 years on this bench." Rodriguez's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. You're a federal judge. And what Brenda doesn't know is that she's been systematically violating federal fair housing laws, federal fraud statutes, and federal racketeering laws. This isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It's a federal case. The color drained from his face as the implications hit him. "Judge Hawthorne, with your authority, we could destroy her completely, but I want to try the democratic process first. Give her a chance to resign voluntarily, make restitution, disappear quietly. Rodriguez laughed a sharp, disbelieving sound. You want to give her a chance? I want to give her enough rope to hang herself publicly because when she refuses, and she will refuse, the entire community will witness her final moments before I drop the federal hammer. That evening, I sat in my car outside Brenda's insurance office, watching her through the plate glass window as she worked late, probably calculating profits from my foreclosure. She had no idea that 18 years of federal judicial experience was about to crash down on her suburban empire like the wrath of God. The hunter had become the hunted, but she still thought she was stalking wounded prey. Tomorrow, she'd learn exactly what kind of predator she'd chosen to target. The next morning, I did what any good federal judge does when facing organized crime. I went straight to the source documents that criminals always forget exist. Tom Bradley met me at the courthouse steps at 8 a.m. sharp, clutching a thermos of coffee that smelled like it could wake the dead. Mrs. Hawthorne, I've been thinking about those original incorporation papers you mentioned. Smart man. We headed straight to the dusty archive basement where county clerks store documents they hope nobody will ever request. The smell of old paper and bureaucratic neglect was overwhelming. But what we found in those forgotten filing cabinets was pure legal dynamite. The 1994 Articles of Incorporation for Meadowbrook Estates HOA included a homeowner bill of rights clause I'd never seen in any modern HOA document. The original charter required annual financial audits, open book policies, and here's the beautiful part, automatic dissolution of board authority if financial irregularities exceeded 10% of annual budget, 10%. Brenda's operation had stolen over 60%. But the nuclear bomb was buried in Section 12, Emergency Governance Intervention. The founding documents included a provision designed specifically for board corruption. Any organized misconduct could trigger immediate suspension of board authority pending full investigation. Legal takeaway. Original HOA incorporation documents supersede all later amendments and often include powerful homeowner protection clauses that corrupt boards hope you'll never discover. Tom whistled low as he read over my shoulder. Judge, this is like finding the Constitution in your attic. The financial records told an even more devastating story. Public filings showed Brenda's board had violated incorporation requirements for 4 consecutive years. No annual audits, no transparent budgets, no homeowner access to financial records, $389,000 in violation fees collected since she became president. Only $23,000 documented in legitimate community improvements. The missing $366,000 had vanished into a web of Kirkpater family businesses like water disappearing into sand. But the power shift moment came when I found the smoking gun that would end everything. A handwritten note tucked inside the original incorporation folder, apparently forgotten by some long-ago county clerk. Emergency intervention clause activated by petition of 25% of homeowners plus documented evidence of systematic financial malfeasance. Board authority suspended immediately pending state oversight investigation. 25% of 180 homes meant 45 signatures. I already had commitments from 37 families Tom and I had quietly contacted over the past week. The math was simple. The law was clear. The evidence was overwhelming. Brenda's criminal empire could be destroyed with a single petition filing. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, holding those original documents, feeling the weight of absolute legal authority settling over me like a familiar judicial robe. For 3 months, I played the role of helpless victim, letting Brenda believe she held all the power. But constitutional law doesn't care about HOA bylaws. Federal statutes don't bow to clipboard-wielding suburban tyrants. And 18 years of judicial experience trumps 6 years of small-time real estate fraud every single time. The beautiful irony was that Brenda had been operating illegally from day one. Every violation letter, every fine, every threat all issued under authority she'd never legally possessed. I pulled out my phone and called Rodriguez. Daniel, it's Patricia. I found the key to the kingdom. Emergency Governance Intervention Clause in the original incorporation. We can dissolve her board immediately. Are you serious? Dead serious. And Daniel, I'm done playing defense. Time to show Brenda what happens when you target a federal judge's community. The war was about to end. But first, I wanted her to dig her hole just a little bit deeper. My dining room transformed overnight into something between a federal investigation headquarters and a military campaign center. Wall-mounted timelines spanning 6 years of Brenda's crimes. Color-coded property maps showing targeted homes, evidence files organized by violation type, financial records, and procedural irregularities. It looked like the FBI had taken over my house, which in a way they had. The War Council assembled Tuesday evening. Myself, Margaret Morgan with her accounting expertise, Tom Bradley with his veteran network connections, Daniel Rodriguez armed with legal firepower, and our newest recruit, Sarah Kim, a young mother whose husband worked in city planning and had inside knowledge of Brenda's development schemes. "All right, team," I said, pointing to our evidence wall like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "Here's how we're going to systematically destroy a criminal enterprise." Rodriguez pulled out a stack of legal documents thick enough to stop bullets. Phase 1. We need 45 homeowner signatures. That's 25% to trigger emergency governance intervention. Current count is 37 confirmed, 8 more identified as sympathetic. Margaret, ever the accountant, had spreadsheets showing exactly what each family lost to Brenda's violation schemes. Total documented theft, $2.1 million. Average loss per household, $47,000. But here's the beautiful part. We can prove systematic targeting based on property values and vulnerable family situations. Legal takeaway. Homeowners have constitutional rights to remove corrupt HOA boards through petition processes, but you need exact percentages and proper documentation to trigger oversight intervention. Tom Bradley, our intelligence chief, had been working his veteran network like a military operation. Brenda's got city connections, but they're all surface level. Her husband's construction company has permit violations going back 3 years. Her brother-in-law's law practice has been reported to the Bar Association twice for ethics violations. Sarah Kim, bouncing her toddler while reviewing planning documents, dropped the tactical nuclear bomb. My husband says Brenda applied for variance permits on Patricia's Corner lot 6 months ago. The duplex project is already approved, pending property acquisition. She's been planning this theft since before Patricia's mother got sick. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't opportunistic harassment. This was premeditated financial assassination. Here's our strategy, I continued. My judicial training taking over. Phase 2. Rodriguez files formal complaints with state HOA oversight boards citing systematic financial malfeasance and procedural violations. We're not asking for investigation. We're demanding immediate intervention. Rodriguez nodded, making notes on legal pads already covered with strategy scribbles. I can have complaints filed tomorrow, complete with financial evidence and homeowner testimonials. State board has mandatory 30-day response period, but with this level of documentation, they'll act faster. Phase 3, Margaret announced, we present our evidence at the next public HOA meeting. Full transparency, complete documentation, community witnesses. Give Brenda one chance to resign voluntarily and make restitution. And when she refuses, Sarah asked. Though we all knew the answer, my smile felt like justice itself. Phase 4, Emergency Governance Intervention. Board authority suspended immediately. State oversight takes control. Federal investigation begins. Tom Bradley raised his weathered hand. What about Phase 5? Phase 5 is my federal judicial authority ending her criminal enterprise permanently, but I want the community to see every step, understand every choice, witness every moment of her downfall. We spent the next 2 hours preparing what Rodriguez called the most comprehensive HOA corruption case in state history. Evidence packets for all in 180 homeowners. Media contact list for local news stations who love David versus Goliath stories. Recording equipment for the public meeting. Legal injunctions ready to halt any retaliatory violations. The technical preparation was meticulous. Sarah's husband provided city planning documents showing Brenda's development timeline. Margaret created financial summaries that translated complex theft schemes into simple charts any neighbor could understand. Tom organized witness testimony from all 15 families who'd been forced to sell. But the most satisfying preparation was psychological. I practiced my presentation until I could deliver it without notes, building from simple HOA violations to systematic federal crimes in a crescendo that would leave no doubt about Brenda's guilt. Remember, I told my team as we wrapped up our final planning session. She still thinks she's dealing with a helpless widow who will eventually give up and go away. She has no idea what's coming. Rodriguez packed up his legal documents with the satisfied smile of someone about to win the lottery. Judge, in 20 years of practice, I've never seen a case this airtight or a defendant this overconfident. Margaret hugged everyone goodnight, whispering, "My kids are going to grow up in a neighborhood where bullies don't win." As my team left, I stood in my transformed dining room, surrounded by evidence of 6 years of systematic cruelty, looking forward to tomorrow's community meeting, where Brenda would finally meet her match. The planning was complete. The trap was set. The hunter was about to become the prey. Time for the final act. Brenda must have sensed the shift in neighborhood dynamics because her desperation reached psychotic levels. Thursday morning, I woke to find troublemaker spray painted across my mailbox in blood-red letters that dripped like something from a horror movie. The smell of fresh paint mixed with morning dew created this nauseating cocktail that made my stomach turn. But Brenda wasn't done with her amateur intimidation campaign. Friday night, all 4 of my car tires were slashed while I slept. Saturday, anonymous letters appeared in team members' mailboxes. Drop your harassment campaign or face legal consequences. We know where you work, where your children go to school. The threats were juvenile but disturbing, especially since they targeted Sarah Kim's toddler specifically. Sunday evening, Brenda filed a police report claiming I'd threatened physical violence during HOA meetings. Complete fabrication, but her deputy cousin was happy to take her statement without questioning the timing or asking for evidence. What Brenda didn't know was that I'd installed security cameras after the first vandalism incident. Every attack, every late-night prowl around my property, every whispered conversation with her nephew, all captured in high-definition digital evidence. But the real escalation came when Tom Bradley discovered why Brenda was suddenly acting so desperately reckless. "Judge, I've been tracking Kirkpatrick Construction's financial situation," Tom said, spreading bank documents across my kitchen table. "They're facing bankruptcy. 3 major development projects stalled due to permit violations. The bank's threatening foreclosure on Brenda's office building next month." The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Brenda wasn't just running a theft scheme anymore. She was fighting for financial survival. The HOA accounts represented her last accessible cash source. And my corner lot was the final piece needed for her duplex development that could save the family business. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "Conservative estimate, $300,000 profit from your forced sale and development project. Without it, they lose everything. Financial desperation makes criminals sloppy and dangerous." Brenda proved both when Margaret Morgan received a middle-of-the-phone call that chilled my blood. "Patricia, you need to hear this recording," Margaret whispered, arriving at my house at 11 p.m. with her laptop. "Brenda called me tonight thinking I'd switched sides." The audio quality was crystal clear. Margaret had wisely hit record the moment she recognized Brenda's voice. "Margaret, you seem like a smart woman with young children to protect. Maybe you should reconsider supporting Patricia's troublemaking campaign. Accidents happen in neighborhoods. Kids play outside unsupervised. Would hate for anything unfortunate to occur." My judicial blood ran ice cold. Threatening children crossed every line from petty harassment into serious criminal territory. But Brenda's desperation provided the perfect trap. Tuesday morning, she called an emergency board meeting to vote on a $500 special assessment due immediately, ostensibly, for urgent infrastructure repairs, but actually to drain every possible dollar from HOA accounts before our intervention could freeze them. The meeting was scheduled with exactly 24 hours notice during working hours when most residents couldn't attend. Classic Brenda tactics. But this time she was walking directly into our prepared ambush. Rodriguez filed restraining orders against further harassment Tuesday afternoon. I documented every threat, every vandalism incident, every intimidation attempt with law enforcement precision. The security cameras captured Brenda's nephew spray painting threats on Margaret's driveway, while Brenda waited in her Lexus engine running like a getaway car. Legal takeaway. Security cameras on your property can record adjacent areas and provide admissible evidence in both civil and criminal proceedings against HOA harassment. But the mini twist that sealed Brenda's fate came from an unexpected source. Florence Murphy, the elderly widow who'd been Brenda's spy, appeared at my door Wednesday evening with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks and a manila envelope clutched in her shaking hands. Patricia, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch her destroy good families. Florence opened the envelope, revealing dozens of forged violation reports with her signature. She promised me $5,000 to spy on neighbors and sign whatever papers she needed. I was scared and broke after my husband died, but this is wrong. The forged documents were devastating evidence of systematic fraud. Florence had unknowingly provided her signature for violations she'd never witnessed, inspections she'd never conducted, meetings she'd never attended. I'll testify, Florence whispered. I'll tell everyone what she made me do. As Florence left, I realized Brenda had just lost her last ally. The elderly widow she'd manipulated and intimidated was now our star witness, ready to expose the entire conspiracy in front of the whole community. Tomorrow's emergency meeting wasn't going to be Brenda's financial salvation. It was going to be her public execution. The hunter had finally cornered her prey. Time for the kill shot. Brenda arrived at Wednesday's emergency meeting like a general preparing for her final battle. She brought her sheriff's deputy cousin, a tall, nervous man who kept touching his badge like a security blanket, and announced to the packed community center that Patricia Hawthorne was about to be arrested for stalking, harassment, and criminal conspiracy. The room buzzed with shocked whispers. 49 residents had crammed into folding chairs designed for maybe 30 people. The air conditioning had mysteriously broken again, and sweat mixed with anticipation created an electric atmosphere that made my skin tingle. Ladies and gentlemen, Brenda declared from her card table throne, voice carrying that theatrical authority of someone who knows they're performing their last act. We're here tonight because one individual has been systematically terrorizing your board members and threatening community safety. She gestured dramatically toward her deputy cousin. Officer Kirkpatrick has evidence of criminal behavior that requires immediate action. The deputy looked deeply uncomfortable as Brenda handed him a manila folder thick with fabricated documentation. Photos of me trespassing on common property, actually walking on public sidewalks. Audio recordings of conversations spliced together to sound threatening. Sworn statements from witnesses who happened to share her last name. Based on this evidence, the deputy announced reluctantly, I'm prepared to issue citations for harassment and trespassing. I sat in the back row, calm as a federal judge, reviewing routine motions, while Rodriguez, beside me, organized boxes of real evidence. Margaret Morgan live streamed the meeting to our neighborhood Facebook group, viewer count climbing toward 200. Tom Bradley had positioned himself near the news reporter I'd contacted local Channel 7, love corruption stories that made their ratings spike. But the moment that made my prosecutorial heart sing came when Florence Murphy stood up in the front row, her written confession trembling in arthritic hands. Brenda, stop this nonsense. I can't watch you lie anymore. Brenda's confident expression flickered like a candle in wind. Florence, you're confused. Please sit down. I am not confused. Florence's voice carried surprising strength for an 82-year-old woman. I signed those fake violation reports because you promised me money and threatened to put a lien on my house if I didn't cooperate. The room erupted. Neighbors gasped, whispered, turned to stare at each other with dawning realization. The deputy's hand moved instinctively away from Brenda, as if her corruption might be contagious. She's senile. Brenda shrieked, her composure cracking like ice under pressure. Florence has dementia. She doesn't know what she's saying. But Florence kept reading her confession with devastating clarity. Forged signatures, fabricated inspections, witness statements for violations she'd never observed. 5 years of systematic fraud documented in her shaky handwriting, but crystal clear memory. The deputy looked at his cousin with growing horror as the implications became unavoidable. This wasn't HOA business. This was felony fraud with his name attached as investigating officer. Brenda, he said quietly, maybe we should arrest her. Brenda screamed, pointing at me like some deranged prosecutor. She organized this conspiracy. She's brainwashed Florence. She's threatening our entire community. That's when I decided the performance had gone on long enough. I stood slowly, moved to the microphone with judicial dignity, and looked directly into the Channel 7 camera. Ladies and gentlemen, before I respond to these accusations, I think you deserve to know exactly who's been targeted by this criminal enterprise. Brenda's face went from flushed red to pale white as she watched me reach into my purse. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft whir of the news camera. My name is Patricia Hawthorne, and I am a United States District Court judge. I held up my federal judicial credentials, badge gleaming under those harsh lights. The silence was so complete you could hear hearts beating. For 18 years, I've prosecuted criminal conspiracies. What you've witnessed tonight is systematic racketeering, federal fraud, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Brenda made a sound like a balloon deflating. The deputy took 3 large steps away from his cousin, suddenly understanding that his career was about to become collateral damage in her criminal enterprise. Officer Kirkpatrick, I continued, my voice carrying all the authority of federal law. The evidence you just presented as probable cause for my arrest consists entirely of fabricated documents created to obstruct justice. I recommend you distance yourself from this conspiracy immediately. The deputy's hand moved to his radio. Dispatch, I need a detective unit at the Meadowbrook Community Center. Possible federal crimes in progress. Brenda collapsed into her chair like a marionette with cut strings, finally understanding that she'd been hunting a predator disguised as prey. The federal hammer was about to fall, and there was nowhere left to run. The room exploded into chaos. 49 neighbors erupted in gasps, shouts, and applause that echoed off the community center walls like thunder. The Channel 7 camera swung between my federal credentials and Brenda's ashen face, capturing every moment of her criminal empire's collapse in high-definition glory. But Brenda wasn't finished. Desperation turned her into something feral and dangerous. You can't do this, she screamed, launching herself toward the microphone like a woman possessed. You're supposed to be neutral. You hid your identity to entrap innocent board members. This is entrapment, illegal surveillance, abuse of judicial authority. The deputy, her own cousin, stepped between us, hand on his weapon, finally understanding which side of the law he needed to be on. Ma'am, step back. You're making this worse. I remained at the podium, calm as a federal judge delivering a death sentence, and addressed the packed room with 18 years of courtroom authority. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something about federal law. When a federal judge witnesses ongoing criminal activity as a private citizen, they have not only the right, but the obligation to report it to appropriate authorities. I pulled out my phone, speed dialed a number I'd memorized 20 years ago. FBI Field Office. This is Judge Patricia Hawthorne. I'm witnessing systematic federal crimes at the Meadowbrook Community Center and need agents dispatched immediately. The words FBI Field Office hit the room like a physical force. Several neighbors started crying tears of relief, vindication, and pure cathartic joy. Margaret Morgan hugged strangers. Tom Bradley stood at attention and saluted me like I was reviewing troops. But Brenda had completely lost her mind. She grabbed the microphone stand, shrieking at the top of her lungs. She's lying. Federal judges can't investigate private citizens. This is a setup, a conspiracy. She probably isn't even a real judge. The Channel 7 reporter stepped forward, camera rolling. Your Honor, can you comment on the scope of this investigation? What you've witnessed tonight represents a 6-year criminal conspiracy involving mail fraud, wire fraud, racketeering, and civil rights violations. This HOA was used as a front for systematic theft targeting vulnerable families during crisis moments. I turned to address Brenda directly, my voice carrying the finality of federal judgment. Mrs. Kirkpatrick, you targeted families grieving the loss of loved ones. You stole homes from people facing medical bankruptcies. You threatened children to silence their parents. You thought you could abuse HOA authority because your victims were too scared or too poor to fight back. Brenda tried to run for the exit, but the deputy blocked her path. Ma'am, you need to stay until FBI agents arrive. I want a lawyer, she screamed. I want my lawyer right now. You'll need a very good one, I replied. Because federal RICO charges carry mandatory minimum sentences. Legal takeaway. Federal RICO laws apply when local corruption involves mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy transforming petty HOA harassment into serious federal felonies punishable by decades in prison. The FBI agents arrived in exactly 18 minutes to black SUVs with enough federal authority to make everyone in the room stand straighter. Special Agent Maria Santos, a woman I'd worked with on dozens of federal cases, entered with the professional competence that made criminals confess just to get the investigation over with. Judge Hawthorne. Agent Santos nodded respectfully. We've been monitoring communications related to this case since your initial call. We're ready to proceed with arrests. Brenda, her nephew Chad, and her brother-in-law were handcuffed within minutes. The sight of federal agents reading Miranda rights to HOA board members was so surreal that several neighbors started recording with their phones. But my favorite moment came when Agent Santos approached the microphone to address the community. Ladies and gentlemen, what Judge Hawthorne uncovered represents the largest residential fraud scheme in this district's history. Over $2 million in stolen home equity, 23 families forced into distressed sales. Systematic violation of federal fair housing laws. The crowd's reaction was part celebration, part shock, part vindication, so pure it was almost religious. As Brenda was led away in handcuffs, she turned back toward me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. This isn't over. You think you've won, but I interrupted her with a mic drop line that would make local news highlights for months. Mrs. Kirkpatrick, in 18 years on the federal bench, I've learned that criminals always think they're smarter than the law. You spent 6 years stealing from families during their darkest moments. Now you'll spend the next 8 to 12 years discovering that federal prison doesn't care about your HOA authority. The community center erupted in the loudest applause I'd ever heard. Louder than any courtroom verdict, any judicial confirmation, any legal victory in my career. Justice wasn't just served. It was delivered with community-wide satisfaction and broadcast live for the world to see. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my garden where Brenda had planned to build her illegal duplex, watching neighborhood kids play in the community pool that's finally accessible to everyone. The morning air smells like fresh coffee and victory, a combination I never get tired of. The legal resolution was swift and devastating. Brenda pleaded guilty to 23 federal charges, including racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. 8 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Her nephew Chad got 3 years for conspiracy and document forgery. The brother-in-law was disbarred and sentenced to 5 years for operating a fraudulent legal practice. But the financial justice was even sweeter. Federal court ordered full restitution of $2.1 million to affected homeowners. My personal settlement was $47,000 plus attorney fees, enough to fund the scholarship program I'd been dreaming about. The HOA's frozen accounts yielded another $180,000 in recoverable funds that went directly back to the community. Kirkpatrick Construction forfeited all fraudulently acquired properties, which were sold at public auction. Average recovery per victimized family, $63,000. Not bad for a suburban homeowner rebellion. Property values in Meadowbrook jumped 12% after the corruption story went national. Turns out buyers love neighborhoods where criminals get destroyed publicly. The community transformation has been extraordinary. Our new HOA board, elected with overwhelming homeowner participation, reduced monthly fees to $35 with complete budget transparency. I serve as unpaid constitutional advisor, making sure we never again face board tyranny. Margaret Morgan won her city council race on a platform of homeowner protection. Tom Bradley leads a veterans outreach program using our common areas. Sarah Kim organized family support networks throughout 3 neighboring subdivisions. Even Florence Murphy, our star witness, became community treasurer with access to every financial record. The ripple effects keep spreading. My story inspired HOA reform legislation in the state Senate. I testified before committees on homeowner protection, describing how federal oversight can demolish local corruption. The FBI created an HOA fraud task force based on our case. 3 other federal judges contacted me about similar schemes in their districts. Knowledge nugget. State HOA oversight boards exist in most states and can investigate financial misconduct. Google your state HOA oversight board to find your local authority. But the personal healing has been the most meaningful part. The scholarship fund established in Mom's memory provides $5,000 annually to local high school graduates pursuing public service careers. Last month, we planted the Judge Patricia Hawthorne Memorial Garden, where Brenda's illegal development was supposed to destroy our green space. Our annual Justice Day festival celebrates transparency and community unity. Neighbors who once lived in fear now organize monthly potlucks, kids' activities, and support networks for families facing crisis. We prove that communities can defeat organized predators when they work together with proper documentation and legal strategy. The media attention has been overwhelming but purposeful. The documentary David vs. HOA Goliath won 3 regional awards. My YouTube interview has 2 million views and counting. Law schools use our case as required study for federal jurisdiction and citizen empowerment. Most satisfying is the weekly emails from HOA victims nationwide seeking advice. I refer serious cases to Rodriguez's expanded legal network, advocate for federal legislation strengthening homeowner rights, and prove repeatedly that one person with courage and documentation can change everything. But you know what makes me smile every morning? Walking through our thriving neighborhood, hearing children laugh in the community pool, seeing neighbors gather for barbecues and celebrations, knowing that bullies didn't win here. Standing on my front porch, looking at that forest green mailbox that started this whole war, I often think about Mom's final words. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Sometimes justice requires patience, strategy, and perfect timing. But it always requires ordinary people refusing to let corruption triumph. Your HOA horror story doesn't have to end with surrender. Document everything. Organize with neighbors. Research your legal rights. And remember, even federal judges started as regular citizens who refused to accept injustice. So, here's my challenge for you. Have you survived an HOA nightmare that others need to hear about? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who refuse to let neighborhood tyrants win. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary justice. Because here's what I learned after 18 years on the bench and 6 months fighting suburban crime. You have more power. You've been watching HOA Entitled Karens Get a Reality Check. If this episode gave you secondhand rage or satisfaction, hit that like, leave your take in the comments, and subscribe so you're the first in line for more weekly HOA chaos.